In May 1428, in the small village of Domremy on the eastern edge of France, a 16-year-old illiterate peasant girl named Jean started telling people she heard the voices of saints. The Archangel Michael, Saint Catherine, Saint Margaret. The voices, she said, told her she had a mission from God. The English had occupied most of northern France. The rightful French king, Charles VII, had not been crowned because the Cathedral of Reims, where French kings were traditionally anointed, was in English-controlled territory. The voices told Jean to lead a French army against the English, lift the siege of Orleans, and escort the king to his coronation. Jean was the daughter of a tenant farmer. She had never ridden a horse. She had never held a weapon. She could not read or write. She had never been more than 10 miles from her village. She told her parents nothing about her mission. They thought she was being courted. In May 1429, she had broken the English siege of Orleans, the most important strategic city in France, after the French royal army had failed for 7 months. By July 1429, she had stood at Charles VII's coronation in Reims Cathedral. She was 17 years old. 2 years later she was dead, burned at the stake in the marketplace of Rouen by an English-controlled court that had convicted her of heresy. 600 years later, she is the patron saint of France, an icon of medieval religious feminism, and one of the most thoroughly documented figures of the entire medieval era. The mystery is not whether she existed. We have her trial transcripts in extraordinary detail. The mystery is how a teenager from a remote village actually did what she did. To understand Joan, you have to understand the 100 Years' War. Since 1337, England and France had been fighting an intermittent war over the French throne. By 1429, the English under King Henry VI controlled most of northern France including Paris. Their Burgundian allies controlled most of the east. Charles VII, the French heir, controlled only the southern provinces. The Siege of Orleans, beginning in October 1428, was the climactic moment. If Orleans fell, the English would push south and probably eliminate French resistance entirely. The French royal cause appeared to be in its terminal stage. Joan arrived at the French court at Chinon in February 1429. She had walked across enemy territory dressed as a man, accompanied by a small escort. She demanded an audience with the king. She was met with skepticism. Charles disguised himself as a courtier and seated a noble on his throne to test her. Joan walked past the impostor and addressed Charles directly. The story may be apocryphal but is widely reported in contemporary accounts. Theological examiners at Poitiers questioned her for 3 weeks. They found her morally and theologically sound, despite her unusual claim of divine voices. The king allowed her to lead a relief expedition to Orleans. He gave her armor, a horse, a banner, and the title of chef de guerre, war leader, alongside experienced French commanders. She arrived at Orleans on April 29, 1429. Within 9 days the English siege was broken. The English commanders, including the Earl of Suffolk and Sir John Talbot, abandoned their siege fortifications and retreated. Eyewitness accounts, including from the French commanders, describe Joan as personally leading assaults, taking an arrow wound through her shoulder, and continuing to fight. Her presence transformed French morale. The English, who genuinely believed they were facing a witch or a divine intervention, suffered massive demoralization. Over the next 10 weeks, French forces under Joan's spiritual leadership and the practical command of professionals like the Duke of Alençon won the Battle of Patay, captured Auxerre, Troyes, and finally Reims. On July 17, 1429, Charles was crowned in Reims Cathedral with Joan standing beside him holding her standard. The campaign was over. Joan urged Charles to immediately march on Paris. He hesitated. The English regrouped. Joan was wounded again at the assault on Paris in September 1429. The momentum was lost. Through the winter and spring of 1430, Joan participated in smaller campaigns with diminishing success. On May 23, 1430, she was captured by Burgundian forces during a sortie at Compiègne. The French king did not negotiate for her release. The Burgundians eventually sold her to the English. The English had a particular interest in trying her as a heretic. If they could prove that her divine inspiration was actually demonic, they could undermine the legitimacy of Charles VII's coronation, which she had championed. Her trial began in February 1431 in Rouen, an English-controlled city. The trial was conducted by a French ecclesiastical court under the direction of Bishop Pierre Cauchon.